The white marble floors of Elevation reflected the crystal chandeliers hanging from the vaulted ceiling. It was Saturday evening, September 16th, 2023, and the restaurant was packed with Atlanta's elite. Tables draped in ivory linen hosted business executives, socialites, and old money families celebrating milestones under the warm glow of candlelight. At table 12, near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Peachtree Street, a black family of 8 gathered around their grandmother. Balloons tied to the chair spelled out, "Happy 80th birthday." The woman, dressed in a lavender dress with a pearl necklace, smiled as her children and grandchildren laughed and shared stories. On the corner of the table sat a simple cake, homemade. 3 layers of chocolate with cream cheese frosting, decorated with fresh strawberries arranged in a heart shape. The cake looked modest compared to the opulence surrounding it, but to this family, it meant everything. The grandmother's daughter had made it using the same recipe passed down through 4 generations. The same cake the grandmother had made for her own mother decades ago in a small kitchen in Savannah. But what happened next would change everything. And nobody at that table knew who the woman who brought that cake really was. By the end of the week, the truth would destroy careers, collapse a culinary empire, and teach a lesson about respect that Atlanta would never forget. If you believe that arrogance deserves consequences and that hidden power makes the sweetest justice, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now, let's talk about what really happened that night. The woman who had brought the cake was named Victoria Langston. To her family, she was simply Mama V, the quiet woman who never missed a birthday, who baked with her grandchildren on Sundays, who wore comfortable shoes and kept her graying hair in a neat bun. She had arrived at Elevation that evening in a simple navy dress, no jewelry except her late husband's wedding band, carrying that homemade cake in a plain white box. When the hostess saw her walk through the entrance holding the box, she hesitated. Elevation had a strict policy: no outside food. The restaurant's reputation was built on Chef Henri Baudin's Michelin-starred creations. Allowing homemade desserts was, in the hostess's words, inconsistent with our standards. But Victoria had called ahead. She had spoken to the manager 3 days prior and explained the situation. Her mother's 80th birthday, a family recipe, a tradition that meant more than any menu item could offer. The manager, after some consideration, had agreed. One exception. One night, Victoria walked to the table with the cake, her daughter and son-in-law already seated with the rest of the family. She placed the box down gently, kissed her mother on the cheek, and sat down without fanfare. She didn't announce herself, didn't ask for special treatment. She simply wanted to celebrate her mother's milestone in peace. From the kitchen, Chef Henri Baudin watched through the small window in the swinging door. He had built Elevation from nothing. 15 years of grueling work, investor meetings, menu revisions, and public relations campaigns had transformed him from an unknown culinary school graduate into one of Atlanta's most recognized chefs. His face appeared in magazines. His restaurant was booked months in advance. He had earned his place among the city's elite, and he was not about to let some homemade cake undermine what he had built. Henri was 42 years old, tall and lean with sharp features and pale skin that reddened when he was angry. He wore his chef's whites like armor, his name embroidered in gold thread on the chest. He had a reputation for being demanding, uncompromising, and brilliant. Food critics praised his unrelenting commitment to excellence. His staff called him a tyrant behind closed doors. When he saw that cake on table 12, something inside him snapped. He pushed through the kitchen doors and walked directly toward the table. His sous chef, a young man named Garrett, looked up from the expo line and exchanged a glance with one of the line cooks. They knew that walk. Something was about to happen. Henri stopped at table 12 and looked down at the cake. The family had just begun singing Happy Birthday. The grandmother's eyes were closed, her hands clasped together as her children and grandchildren harmonized around her. The homemade cake sat in the center of the table, candles flickering. Henri didn't wait for the song to finish. "Excuse me," he said loudly, cutting through the melody. The family stopped singing. All eyes turned to him. Victoria looked up from her seat, her expression calm but cautious. "I'm Chef Henri Baudin," he said, his French accent thick and deliberate. "I own this establishment, and I need to address something immediately." Victoria's daughter, Monica, spoke first. "Is there a problem, chef?" "We called ahead about the cake. Your manager approved it." Henri's jaw tightened. "My manager does not speak for me, and I do not allow outside food in my restaurant. It is a health code violation. It is disrespectful to my kitchen, and frankly," he looked down at the cake with visible disdain, "it is an insult to the standards we uphold here." The nearby tables had gone quiet. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks were set down, heads turned. Victoria remained seated, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't speak. Monica stood up. "Chef, with all due respect, we're celebrating my grandmother's 80th birthday. This cake is a family tradition. We're not trying to disrespect anyone." Henri laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was sharp and dismissive. "A family tradition," he repeated, shaking his head. "Do you know what tradition means in my kitchen? It means technique passed down through generations of trained professionals. It means precision. It means art." He gestured to the cake. This is something you'd find at a church bake sale. It doesn't belong here." Garrett, the sous chef, had followed Henri out of the kitchen. He stood a few feet behind, arms crossed, a smirk on his face. He had always admired Henri's confidence, his willingness to speak his mind. And in this moment, Garrett saw an opportunity to align himself with power. "Chef's right," Garrett said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "We have standards. If we let everyone bring in their Costco cakes, what's the point of having a Michelin star?" A woman at table 9, a regular patron named Diane Forrester, laughed. She was in her 50s, draped in designer labels, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe ponytail. She leaned over to her husband and said, just loud enough to be heard, "Imagine thinking a grocery store cake belongs in Elevation." Her husband chuckled. Two other diners at a nearby table exchanged amused glances. Victoria still hadn't said a word. She looked at her mother, who had opened her eyes and was staring at Henri with confusion and hurt. The grandmother reached for Victoria's hand under the table and squeezed it gently. Henri wasn't finished. "You know what bothers me most?" he continued, his voice rising. "It's the audacity. You come into my restaurant, you sit at my tables, you enjoy the ambiance I created, and then you bring this insult of a dessert and expect me to just accept it." He reached forward and picked up one of the strawberries from the top of the cake. He examined it like it was evidence in a trial. "Look at this. Uneven cuts. The frosting is grainy. The layers aren't level." He dropped the strawberry back onto the cake. "This is amateur work, and it has no place in a professional environment." Monica's husband, Trevor, stood up now. He was a tall man, built like a former athlete, his voice steady but firm. "Chef, you're out of line. We paid for this reservation. We're paying customers. You need to back off." Henri turned to Trevor, his eyes cold. "Paying customers who don't respect the establishment. I could have your table removed right now." Victoria finally stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't argue. She simply placed her napkin on the table and said, in a voice so calm it almost seemed emotionless, "We'll leave." Monica turned to her. "Mama, no, we're not leaving. This is Grandma's birthday." But Victoria shook her head. "It's fine, baby. Let's go." Henri smiled. It was the smile of someone who believed he had won. "A wise decision," he said. And then he did something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He picked up a glass of red wine from the table next to them, a Bordeaux that had been poured moments earlier for another guest, and before anyone could react, he tilted it over the homemade cake. The deep crimson liquid poured out in a slow, deliberate stream, soaking into the cream cheese frosting, staining the chocolate layers, dripping onto the white tablecloth below. The family gasped. The grandmother's hands flew to her mouth. Monica shouted, "What the hell is wrong with you?" But Henri wasn't done. As Victoria moved to step away from the table, he placed his hand on her shoulder, not gently, and pushed her back slightly. Not hard enough to make her fall, but enough to make her stumble half a step. Enough to make it clear that he saw her as beneath him. "Stay," he said coldly. "Clean up your mess before you go." The room was silent. Every single person in that restaurant was watching. Several people had their phones out recording. A live stream notification appeared on someone's Instagram story. The moment was being captured from multiple angles. Victoria looked at Henri. Her eyes didn't show anger. They didn't show fear. They showed something far more unsettling. Calm. Complete, absolute calm. She straightened her dress, looked at her family and said quietly, "Let's go." Her mother stood, tears in her eyes. Monica grabbed her grandmother's purse. Trevor put his arm around his wife. The whole family moved toward the exit, leaving the wine-soaked cake behind, the candles still burning in the mess. As they walked past the other tables, not a single person said anything. Diane Forrester whispered to her husband, "Well, that was uncomfortable." Garrett, the sous chef, laughed under his breath and said to one of the servers, "Some people just don't know their place." Victoria walked out of Elevation with her head held high, her family behind her. She didn't look back. She didn't say another word. And nobody in that restaurant understood what they had just witnessed. You saw the calm with which she left, didn't you? Could you maintain that kind of dignity in the face of such cruelty? Leave your answer in the comments. The door closed behind Victoria and her family, and the noise in Elevation slowly resumed. Forks clinked against plates. Conversations restarted. Garrett returned to the kitchen grinning as he recounted the scene to the line cooks. Henri stood at table 12 for a moment longer, looking at the ruined cake, before walking back to his office. But something had shifted in the air. One of the servers, a young woman named Keisha, stood near the hostess stand, her hands trembling slightly. She had watched the entire scene unfold. She had seen the way Chef Henri pushed that woman. She had seen the disrespect, the cruelty, the public humiliation. And something about it felt wrong, deeply wrong. Keisha pulled out her phone during her break and texted her roommate, "You won't believe what just happened at work." At table 9, Diane Forrester scrolled through her Instagram feed and saw that someone had already posted a video clip of the incident. The caption read, "Chef at Elevation just humiliated a black family on their grandmother's birthday, poured wine on their homemade cake. This is disgusting." The video had 53 views. By the time Diane refreshed the page 2 minutes later, it had 400. Back in the kitchen, Henry poured himself a glass of scotch and sat at his desk. He felt justified, vindicated even. He had protected his restaurant's reputation. He had enforced his standards. In his mind, he had done exactly what any chef with integrity would do. Garrett knocked on the door and entered without waiting for permission. "Chef, that was legendary. You really put them in their place." Henry took a sip of his scotch. "Standards, Garrett. If you don't enforce them, you lose everything." But even as he said it, a small, nagging doubt crept into the back of his mind. The way that woman had looked at him, the absolute stillness in her expression. It wasn't the look of someone defeated. It was the look of someone who knew something he didn't. He pushed the thought away and focused on the dinner service. Outside, Victoria sat in the back seat of her son-in-law's car, her mother beside her holding her hand. Nobody spoke. The silence was heavy, weighted with hurt and anger and confusion. Monica turned around from the front seat. "Mama, why didn't you say something? Why didn't you tell him who you are?" Victoria looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "Because it wouldn't have mattered in that moment, baby. People like that don't listen until they have no choice." Trevor glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "So what happens now?" Victoria's expression didn't change. "Now, we go home. We have cake. We celebrate your grandmother properly." But Monica knew her mother better than that. She saw the set of her jaw, the way her fingers drummed once, twice against her knee. A small tell that Victoria was already thinking 5 steps ahead. And after that? Monica asked. Victoria met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. After that, we'll see. By midnight, the video had gone viral. Not mainstream viral, not yet. But it was spreading through foodie groups, local Atlanta forums, and hospitality industry pages. People who had eaten at Elevation before commented with shock. Others shared their own experiences of being treated poorly at high-end restaurants. One comment stood out. Does anyone know who that woman was? She handled that with so much grace. Nobody had an answer. Yet, Henry went to bed that night feeling victorious. He didn't check social media. He didn't read the comments. He had no idea that the foundation of everything he had built was already beginning to crack. It was Monday morning, September 18th, when the first phone call came. Henri was at the restaurant early, prepping for a private event later that week. His phone rang. The caller ID showed a Los Angeles number he didn't recognize. Chef Baudin speaking. The voice on the other end was professional, clipped. Chef, this is Marcus Reed from the Coastal Restaurant Group. We're calling to inform you that we're withdrawing our investment offer. Henri froze. Coastal Restaurant Group had been in talks with him for 6 months about opening a second location of Elevation in Los Angeles. The deal was worth $3 million. I'm sorry, what? Why? We've reviewed recent developments and determined that your brand values don't align with ours. The decision is final. Our legal team will be in touch. The line went dead. Henri stared at his phone. Recent developments? What recent developments? He opened his laptop and typed Elevation Atlanta into the search bar. The first result was a Twitter thread with over 10,000 retweets. The video of Saturday night was embedded at the top. His stomach dropped. The thread dissected every moment of the incident. The wine being poured, the push, the mocking laughter from other diners, and the comments were brutal. This is disgusting. Boycott Elevation. Imagine being this arrogant. I will never eat here again. That woman showed more class in 60 seconds than this chef has in his entire life. Henri scrolled faster, his heart pounding. Food bloggers he had once courted were now condemning him. Industry colleagues were distancing themselves. And worst of all, people were asking the same question over and over. Who was that woman? She deserves justice. At 9:15 that morning, Henri's phone rang again. This time it was his landlord. Henry, we need to talk. The landlord, a man named Robert Keane, owned the building that housed Elevation. The lease was up for renewal in 3 months, and Henri had been negotiating favorable terms for a 5-year extension. Robert, I'm dealing with a situation right now. Can this wait? No, it can't. I'm terminating your lease. Henri's blood ran cold. You can't do that. We have a contract. The contract has a morality clause. Your actions over the weekend constitute a violation. My legal team agrees. You have 90 days to vacate. Robert, please. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, Henri. I saw the video. So did my wife. So did half of Atlanta. You're done. The line went dead. Henri sat in his office, the walls closing in around him. This couldn't be happening. Not over one incident, not over one family, not over one homemade cake. He picked up his phone and called his publicist, a sharp woman named Amanda Cross, who had helped him build his media presence. Amanda, I need damage control. Now. There was a long pause on the other end. Henry, I'm dropping you as a client. What? Amanda, you can't. I can and I am. What you did was indefensible. I'm not attaching my name to this. Good luck. Another deadline. By Tuesday morning, September 19th, the truth began to emerge. A journalist from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had done some digging. She reached out to contacts in the hospitality industry, asked around, cross-referenced business registrations. And then she found it. Victoria Langston, founder and CEO of Langston Hospitality Group. The article dropped at 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. The woman chef, Henri Baudin, humiliated, owns half of Atlanta's restaurant scene. The piece detailed Victoria's career, how she had started as a line cook in Savannah in 1985, how she had worked her way up through kitchens across the South, saving every dollar, learning every aspect of the business. How she had opened her first restaurant in 1993 with a loan from her late husband's life insurance policy. And how, over the next 30 years, she had built an empire. Langston Hospitality Group owned 214 restaurants across the Southeast, fine dining establishments, casual eateries, catering companies, event spaces. The company's estimated value was $2.8 billion. Victoria herself was worth an estimated $900 million. But there was one more detail that made Henri's hands go numb as he read. Langston Hospitality Group owned the building that housed Elevation. Robert Keane, the landlord who had called Henri on Monday, wasn't the true owner. He was the property manager. The actual owner, buried in LLC filings and trust documents, was Victoria Langston. Henri had insulted, humiliated, and physically pushed the woman who owned the ground beneath his restaurant. The article went viral within hours. National outlets picked it up. CNN ran a segment. The New York Times food section published an opinion piece titled, "When Arrogance Meets Accountability." And the comments section exploded. She owns the building? Oh, this is perfect. Justice is coming for him, and I am here for it. Imagine being that stupid. By Wednesday, September 20th, Elevation was in freefall. Reservations were cancelled. The phone rang constantly with people calling not to book tables, but to yell at whoever answered. Suppliers began pulling out. The seafood distributor that had provided Henri with fresh oysters and lobster for years sent an email. "We're terminating our contract effective immediately." The produce company followed. Then the wine distributor. Garrett, the sous chef who had laughed along with Henri, was fired by Henri himself in a desperate attempt to show contrition. It didn't work. Garrett went to the press and gave an interview where he claimed he had always disagreed with Henri's behavior, but felt pressured to go along with it. Nobody believed him, but the damage to Henri was done anyway. On Thursday, September 21st, the health department showed up for an unannounced inspection. They found 3 violations, none of them serious, but enough to generate another headline. Elevation cited for health code violations amid scandal. Diane Forrester, the woman who had laughed during the incident, was identified by internet sleuths. Her employer, a PR firm, issued a statement saying she no longer worked for them. Her social media accounts went private, but not before she received thousands of messages calling her complicit. And through it all, Victoria Langston said nothing publicly. She didn't give interviews. She didn't release statements. She didn't gloat or grandstand. She simply let the consequences unfold. It was Friday, September 22nd, when Henri received the final blow. A certified letter arrived at the restaurant. Inside was a formal notice of lease termination, 90 days to vacate, no exceptions, no extensions. Attached was a personal note, handwritten on Langston Hospitality Group letterhead. "Chef Baudin, you judged my mother's cake without tasting it. You judged me without knowing me. You decided we didn't belong in your restaurant based on nothing but your own arrogance. I don't believe in second chances for people who refuse to see others as equals. Your lease is terminated. Your suppliers have been informed. Your reputation is yours to rebuild if you can. I wish you clarity, Victoria Langston." Henri read the note 3 times. His hands were shaking. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to fight back. But deep down, in a place he didn't want to acknowledge, he knew she was right. He had destroyed himself. By the end of the week, Elevation was empty. The last reservations had been honored, but no new ones were coming in. The staff had been let go. The kitchen was silent. Henri stood alone in the dining room on Saturday night, exactly 1 week after the incident. The chandeliers still glowed, the marble floors still gleamed, but there was nobody there to see it. He thought about everything he had built. 15 years of work, gone in 7 days. He thought about the moment he had poured that wine on the cake, the moment he had pushed Victoria's shoulder, the moment he had let his arrogance convince him that he was untouchable, and he realized too late that respect isn't something you demand. It's something you earn. And once you lose it, no amount of Michelin stars can get it back. On October 5, 2023, Elevation closed its doors permanently. The restaurant was gutted and renovated. 6 months later, it reopened as a community space funded by Langston Hospitality Group, offering free culinary classes to young people from underserved neighborhoods in Atlanta. Henri Baudin moved to a small town in North Carolina. He tried to open a bistro there, but the story followed him. Investors wouldn't touch him, critics wouldn't review him. The culinary world had moved on. Victoria Langston continued running her empire. She never spoke publicly about the incident. When asked by reporters, her only comment was, "I don't waste time on people who don't see value in others. I'm too busy building something meaningful." Her mother lived to see her 82nd birthday. The family celebrated with the same homemade chocolate cake, this time in the comfort of Victoria's home, surrounded by love and respect. And the lesson was clear. When you humiliate someone without knowing who they are, you're not just disrespecting them, you're revealing exactly who you are. And sometimes, the consequences of that revelation are swift, severe, and irreversible. This case reminds us that no one should be judged by their appearance or dismissed because they don't fit someone's narrow definition of worth. Justice, when it comes, is complete and irreversible. Did you catch the signs that something was wrong throughout the story? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story of poetic justice, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave a like if this story inspired you, and share it with someone who believes that hidden power makes the sweetest plot twist.